All right. It is April 26th. By the time you watch this, it's late at night for me right now. One hell of a long day. I got a lot done today, but more importantly today, at the end of the day, I squeezed in a conversation with a man called Guy Wilcken. But a true, solid outdoorsman, father, veteran, just all around, absolute solid gentleman. I thoroughly enjoyed my time I spent talking to him. And this is one of those conversations that's going to leave you going, holy bleep. You got to listen to this one. It may start off a little slow for some of you, or maybe it won't. For myself, I love listening to what could be called our senior members of society. I love listening. Love it. I can sit there and listen for days. And what he has to share with all of you through this channel is something else. Believe me. It's one of those, as it goes, it just keeps getting better and better and makes you go, holy cow. I'm not kidding you. You wait till you hear this testimony. It's going to leave you going, wow. But anyways, on a side note, again, while we're recording this, when you're having a conversation with somebody and you wait for your typical them to finish their sentence, finish what they're saying, and you get that pause where you join the conversation, well, unfortunately, when that pause comes up, I'll start talking, but they do not hear me talking yet. So that causes us to overlap. It's just the way the program's built. I don't interrupt anybody ever normally, but that's what happens on this Riverside platform that we have to use to do this. Okay, guys? So don't get frustrated if it happens a couple times. I kept my mouth shut 99% of the time and just listen. But when I tried to talk, as you've seen in the previous episodes, there's an overlap between the two people on this program. It's got nothing to do with the people. It's the program. But this is one hell of a conversation. I suggest you listen to this one. Holy cow. Am I glad we found Guy? And I hope he's going to come back on here and give us an update of his knowledge gathering later on. He's going to go back finally to where one of these absolute, unbelievable, amazing encounters went down. So close, he said he could have jammed his fingers up into this dude's nose. It was so close to him, and he was 6'5". Guy, 6'5". Have a listen. All right, it's where, you know what? Don't even think about the screen. It's just two guys having a bullshit session.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Anybody
no doubt,
wants to listen, they can listen up.
I'm used to doing the Zoom stuff for meetings, for work and stuff, so yeah, it's all good.
So Guy Wilcken, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
You know what? My grandfather's name is Guy. I've never met a Guy since.
Well, yeah, it's like, I get it all the time, and they're like, is your name really Guy? And I'm like, yeah, I'm named after my dad. So, yeah, I'm like, we're guys from way back. You got to meet my sister, Gal,
Where are you now? You're in Washington?
No, currently I reside in Nampa, Idaho.
Oh, you're in Idaho?
Yeah, which is, Nampa now is just primarily, a suburb of Boise. It's gotten just outrageously, huge since the pandemic. Everybody from all the blue states fled and kind of landed here. So
Right.
yeah, it's like, okay, come.
Are you living rural right now? Oh, sorry.
I wish.
This thing's almost like talking on a radio. You know what I mean? Like when I pause, or when you pause, you seem like it's pause it. You don't hear exactly when I start talking again. No big deal. We'll get around it.
Yeah, I don't want to walk on you. That's kind of what I was concerned about. So I'll kind of see what kind of delay we got going on here. But no, I lived, primarily rural, and I've got a lake just right down at the end of the lane, but my boat hasn't got wet in it for 2 years. So, that's just the way that shit works. But, yeah, and I'm able to ride the farm roads to work. It's a 45-minute commute, but I can ride the bike and everything out there and feel relatively safe. But yeah, I don't get the bike anywhere near the interstate around here. That's just like, death wish down there. So stay away from that stuff. Yeah.
You got grizzlies around you?
Not down here. No. Where I used to hunt when I lived in eastern Idaho, there's pretty good population up around Island Park and West Yellowstone in that area there. But over here, and I've been here for 6 years now, and it's kind of like I'm out of my element. I moved over here, and I met a wonderful lady, and after my last divorce, and so anyway, it's like I'm out of my element. It's pretty much just high desert out here, and I've hunted high
Oh,
desert
really?
before in the big desert just outside of Pocatello there for years, and
Right.
there's a boatload of elk and deer and everything out there. I've harvested quite a few elk out of the big desert, but over here it's a little different.
Really?
Yeah, little different environment, and there is there's some elk hunts out here, but the last couple of years, from what I've been talking to the local guys, is they really need to have a lot of weather to move the elk in here, and just haven't had it in the last few years. So it
So
used to be.
when you say you oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. It used to be just south of me here in the Owyhees. It used to be a real trophy class mule deer hunt out there,
Oh,
but they kind of went ape shit with that, and now they've got it restricted to it's a draw hunt for a certain amount of
wow.
permits, and then they've got it open for 2 point, and it's like, well, if you kill all your 2 points off, you're not going to have mature bucks down the road. But I'm not gonna
Yeah.
I'm not gonna get into all the management processes of the Idaho, fish and game, but they do some sketchy
Yeah,
shit
yeah.
for sure.
You mentioned hunting a high desert. Like I can't imagine what is it? So there's no timber there and there's elk there?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Because
Wow.
I guess doing some research that the elk were originally plains animals, so they were
Right.
primarily driven to the mountains by us folks. So, but yeah,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
the big desert just west of Blackfoot. And they go, I don't know there's probably 3,000 square miles of the big desert out there. And the Idaho National
Wow.
Lab, they encompass 964 square miles for the National Lab. And there is just a boatload of elk that reside on that federal
So I guess if you
reservation.
find the water hole, you found your elk.
Well, yeah, yeah, because I took my oldest boy out there, I think when he was 10 or so, and he's like, Dad, is there elk out here? And I'm like, well, we'll see. He says, well, how are we going to find them? I'm like, dude, we'll just drive the fence lines and look for knockdown fence and hair and stuff like that. And we hadn't went 3 miles, and I found a big old place where herd had been coming through there. The top strand was knocked down, hair everywhere and stuff. So, and I had
Perfect.
a permit that year. So 2 weeks later, and it was an August hunt, which was kind of weird because
Oh,
you're in the desert in August. It's hotter than shit. So I
yeah,
had
yeah.
some two big marine coolers that I packed full of blocked ice and everything, and went out there. And sure enough, first morning we rode down the road and got off the bike or the wheeler and walked about 80 yards, come over a crest, and there was probably 80 to 100 head bedded down out there in the sagebrush.
What?
And yeah,
No way.
they got up, and
Oh
I
my God.
whacked
I
this
can only
one.
imagine.
It was a cow tag, and I whacked a big old cow, and so went out there, got her gutted out, and had the coolers in the truck. So we jammed back, got the truck, brought it out there, broke her down, got her in the cooler, and then headed home. That was the end of that. So,
Beautiful. Oh
yeah,
man, I can only imagine. Everywhere I hunt is a jungle. I got to hunt jungle. That's all there
yeah,
is to it. When I go up
right.
north, I'm hunting jungle. I hunt elk here on the end. I'm hunting jungle.
Yeah,
Don't ever
that's
get to
why,
spot.
that was back in, my earlier years, elk hunting, deer hunting. I was my dad used to call it the rainforest of Idaho over in southeast Idaho there, and I mean, it was just, dog hair, timber, mountain ash, scrub quakey shit,
Yeah.
and then that mountain laurel, that shit, how it grows up and gets impenetrable. So, yeah. So,
Oh
yeah.
man, where I'm elk hunting now, almost I don't know how many times if I've had them within 20 yards, 20 25 yards, you can't see nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think, well,
Drives you nuts.
the last bull I took, and this has been several years ago, but, I took him at 30 yards during a
Hmm.
rifle hunt, called him, I was got up on a deal there, and you couldn't see more than 30 yards in either direction because the timber was so thick. And I mewed a couple
Yep.
of times, and I heard something coming, and I thought it was my buddy, So I was just out chill. I called in Donnie. He'll be here any minute now. And here he comes. Nice little 6 point, so 30 yards. I
Nice.
brought that I bought that 300 Win Mag, years ago for speed goat hunting. Because that man, if I'm gonna get a
Right.
speed goat, he's gonna be out there the long range. And I've taken four antelope, and all of them have been under 20 yards. But I
No
had
way.
that,
Oh wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's kind
Have
of
you seen the
crazy.
size of those elk I'm getting on the cameras here on Vancouver Island?
Oh yeah, it's crazy, man. That were all
Oh my
Roosevelts, aren't they?
god. Yeah. Huge.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. Yeah,
I've been
yep.
trying to get a draw tag for 35 years. Not me.
Yeah, well, there's a mule deer unit down here. Well, between about 150 miles away. My cousin's lived there his whole life, and I've put in on that unit for this will be my 28th year, and haven't drawn yet.
Ugh.
So
I
it's
just
but
hate it. Don't you hate it when you check the results? I can't stand it.
yeah,
It's like, come on. Come on. I was
but
saying, I was joking about, like, right, if I live to be 85 years old, I'm just going to go shoot the biggest one I can find anyway. Lock me up. I don't care. Just make sure you lock me up with a mount.
yeah. My childhood buddy, he called me up here a month or so ago, and his dad's 86 years old this year. And he's like, "Yeah, Dad wants to put in for moose this year." And I'm like, well, he probably should have started that about 40 years ago, because I don't know how the moose hunts are down there, but in Idaho, it's once in a lifetime bull draw.
Right.
And just after I got out of the Marine Corps, I'd put in, hell, I'm going to put it on a moose hunt. Very first time. And I drew. And
No way.
some of the old boys that I elk hunt with, they've been putting in for, 25, 30 years. And they were so pissed off. I'm like, dude, it's the luck of the draw,
Right.
apparently, And I can't
Well, I've done
can't
that
control any of
twice now. I
that.
had a buddy of mine. Buddy of mine got his hunting license, first time ever, and he was like, we're talking in his 40s. We were in our 40s. Gets his hunting license, and he goes, I go, well, you got to put in for draws. He goes, what do you mean? I go, don't worry about it. I'll give you the numbers. So I give
Right.
him my draw. So I put in for California sheep, Dall sheep, Roosevelt elk, mountain goat, and I think that's all I put in for. I gave him the same draw numbers in the areas that I got, and I've been doing for the island elk for 35 years. He pulls the elk tag.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. But at
I know
least
it
I went
happened.
with him. We got a 390-inch bull, though. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
And
Yeah.
then another buddy of mine, contractor from New Zealand, he goes, "Oh, I just got my residency. I got my Canadian citizenship." And I go, "Right on. Now you can put in for the draws for hunting." He goes, "Oh yeah, what should I put in?" I gave him the numbers that I put in. He pulls the elk tag.
Yeah. Yeah, I had that same
Right?
thing.
I'm like, anyway.
It's like
So
crazy.
when did you tell me what happened? What have you seen? What have you learned about this other side of the real world out there?
Well, this is going back to the mid '60s. When this all started. I sent you that story about the Yankee Fork lumberjacks. And I was going to write out the whole thing, but it's like this is going to take me 2 or 3 days because I'm just,
Yeah.
I used to write short stories and things like that. So it's like, I'm
Oh wow.
pretty anal about, you know, getting that stuff
Yeah,
done
yeah.
right. And I'm like, so anyway, I just threw that out there, and this was on a Saturday night. I was laying there in bed and I thought, well, I'll get this hammered out. Well, it took me about 2.5 hours just to get that little short deal out.
Yeah.
So, and it's like, well, I might hear it, a year or two from now, because I know Steve had just bombarded you with, everybody wanting to share stuff. Well, I was laying there
That's all
Monday
right.
morning. I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning every morning, just out of habit and Marine Corps life and everything. But I woke up 4 o'clock, didn't want to get up and wake up Mama because I don't have to leave to go to work till about 6:30 or so. So I
Mhm.
scrolling through the YouTube and I'm like, what the hell is this? Steve's got this deal on here, 20 and a quarter inch rack. That's about pissing myself. He's reading my story like less than, you
Right
know,
on.
36 hours later. And I thought, that's pretty cool. So at any rate, yeah,
Yeah.
it all started like say, I was kind of reading through the comments on that video, and there was a gentleman on there who said, "Yeah, pretty good memory for a 5-year-old." And it's like, well, I was probably misleading about forgetting that because, I didn't forget about it at that time because, I thought about it progressively for years until, the sports and hunting and everything, you know, primarily took over my drive and the way I wanted to go in life because yeah, I lived for him. My dad was an outdoorsman, me and my siblings, we were all intense before we were a year old, on the Salmon River or the Yankee Fork, something like that. So,
Right.
so yeah, I was like, yeah, it wasn't like I forgot it at that time. It was just one of those things that you just kind of pushed out to the side. But at
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
rate, do you
Well,
want to rehash that Yankee Fork deal? Or
I want you to tell me everything from the beginning, because you know what? A lot of people that are going to be listening to us now, they won't even probably even watch or hear when I read your email. There's so many, right? I mean, I read them almost every single day.
yeah, I'll bet. Yeah. So yeah, at any rate,
But yeah, let
and
it rip. What happened?
well, so you know, in remembrance, of course, I'm thinking it was probably 1966, or it could have been 67. But at that point in time, I was charged with if my sister's out of camp or out of mom's or dad's arms, I had to have a hold of her hand or the back of her coat. And I remember at this time, I had a hold of her hand and we were doing the whole deal. So I kind of relate the time frame to 66. So at any rate, we left Pocatello going up there. My dad's partner, Buck Jensen, they were partners in a Buck owned I believe it was a Conoco dealership or station in Challis, Idaho. And my dad he started driving tanker for Colette Tank Lines in 1938. And so he got with Buck and they decided, well, hey, let's buy a truck and you can service me and then we can service all these other places in Salmon and Stanley or wherever, so that's what they did. And so anyway, they had filed a claim in the old ghost town, just across the river from the old ghost town of Custer. You go upriver from Yankee Fork, you Bonanza and Custer, and they dredged that back in I'm going to say the 20s or 30s with this big old dredge. And so there was just great big huge windrows where the discharge arm would windrow all this stuff behind where they were dredging. And there was a road that went up the river, but it had apparently washed out that year. So Buck had told my dad, well, when you get up to the end of the road, we'll come down there and we'll meet you there and bring all your stuff up and we'll set up and everything. They brought in their camp trailers and stuff prior to the bridge washing out. So we got up there, Buck come down and we got in the Jeep, my dad, he was one of these guys that, he's kind of really dry humor, and it was like, if he could put a little fear in you, he'd do it, which is a good thing.
Right.
So he's like, yeah,
Yeah.
and he never owned a 4-wheel drive until 1976. He just refused to because they'll do nothing to get you in trouble. You don't need a 4-wheel drive to get you in trouble and stuff. He's one of these kind of guys.
Oh
So
boy.
so we
Yeah.
go up
Yeah.
there. Buck comes down this Willie's Jeep, and we're going up this across on it would be the west side of the river. There was an old logging road over there, and it went up 5 or 6 miles where it brought you down on the road where you could get back into Custer there. And I was just petrified of the whole deal, because 4-wheel drive, this is going to get me killed or stuck or something. So we get up there and it was raining, been raining all day long. We set up camp, the tent, the aluminum poles you got to assemble, and it was like a 6-man tent back then. And
That stinky canvas.
yeah. Well, prior to this, my dad and my uncle, they always used, wall tents. And so, but this was the big purchase for the family, I guess, one of these easy to set up aluminum rod
I
tents.
remember those.
Yeah, so we got that all set up and had the dinner deal going on and ate dinner, and then the men all built the fire, and there was my mom and dad and Buck and Ethel and Adrian and his wife. I can't remember what her name is, but they'd all been friends for years and years. And Buck actually had been with Corps Engineers, and they built the road in from North Fork on the Salmon River, where the North Fork confluences with the main river, downriver to what's Corn Creek. That's the end of the road. That's as far as you go before you get into the river and overturn. So, but so he'd been well versed in everything. He'd been mining and excavating and everything. So they had this claim up there. We got all set up, and like I say, they built a big fire, and we're sitting around the fire, and the rain had stopped for a while, and it wasn't raining at the time, and we're all just sitting around there, and they were talking shop and everything, and then it was like, I'm going to say, this was probably in late June to before the 4th of July, because there were still salmon in the river. And so it gets, we're all sitting around the fire, and then my dad and Buck are chatting, and this god awful, and what it sounded like was an air raid siren. And I know this because in Pocatello, where I lived and was born and everything, my dad had his truck yard was over in the Naval Ordnance Plant, and where they retubed 16-inch guns. And farting around there with my buddies and everything, we found an old air raid siren that was in this outside storage, and you crank it and you start cranking, and it starts out,
Right.
and just keeps pitching up. Well, that's just about what this noise sounded like. And, and it started out, like say, that really low pitch, and just kept gaining and gaining for maybe 10, 15 seconds or so, and then just abruptly cut off, and everybody's just like looking at one another. And Buck, and he was
No
just
doubt.
he was, he, he was a smaller guy. He's probably like 5'6", 5'7", and he was sitting in one of those nylon web camp chairs, and he just had his head down, and Adrian was sitting right across from him, and he had his head down, and then after this, he's like, sons of bitches. And my dad, he's like, oh, who's that? And he's like, God, it's them lumberjacks from down the goddamn canyon there, about a mile down below there. They had a cut on the east side that came up to where they were doing their timber operation. So, and my dad, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, he says, like once or twice a week, there'll be usually 2 or 3 of them bastards down there, you know, screaming and yelling. And then the second call started, the same wind up air raid siren sound deal. And so after that, it's like, well, tell me more about it. My dad's like, well, we went down there and we talked to them, and they claim that no, they're not coming up here. They're not bothering us and stuff. The third call went off, and my mom and all the other ladies, they were getting just super paranoid, So she got up, gathered up my sister, and they headed off to Buck and Ethel's camper, and we're all standing there, and Dad got up, Buck got up, and then the fourth call, and Buck hollered at him, "Go home, you drunken bastard." Because apparently we got to rewind back up the bus here a minute. Buck was telling my dad that, they get down there and they do all this howling and screaming, and then they start yelling at each other, sound like drunken Chinamen or something down there, And I thought, well, that's pretty crazy, So at any rate, we all get up. It started raining again after the fourth call. So Buck had said, yeah, go home drunk, SOB. So, and I popped up because I was trying to be a badass around my dad and stuff. So when this happened, from where the fire was, you go out, and it was pretty much just a 2-track, or a logging road that went up the creek, and then just 20 or 30 yards beyond that, the grade sloped down towards the river, which was about 30 yards away, and then across, and they had this landing built just right there by the bridge that they put across the river to get to their claim. So I go out there and I'm screaming, "Drunk man, go home! Drunk man, go home!" And then the fifth and final call started, and it wound up like that air raid siren, and then right at the end there was just this hellacious, you know. And my mom was standing in the door, and she hauled me, "Get your ass over here!" So and I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I'm ready to go now," you know, because that kind of got me all haired up, you know, hairs
How
on the
far
back.
away was that one?
Probably about 60 to 80 yards. And I mean, dude, it was
Whoa,
loud.
close.
It was freaking loud. You know, I mean, you could feel it, you
Crazy.
know, in the air and everything, you know. So like we resided back in, and then, you know, half an hour or so later, we went and got all bedded down in the tent. Everything was fine. Next morning, it dawned, and it was just a beautiful, you know, summer day, not a cloud in the sky. And it, we got up, had breakfast, and the canyon that we're in up there is a pretty steep canyon. So the sun probably didn't come up over the ridge until 9 o'clock or so. So my dad was telling Buck, "Well, let's go over there and, you know, see what the damages are, see if what's going on." So we walked down. I, of course, had a hold of my little sister's hand the whole time because no, Dad packed her down to the bridge, and then it was my duty to hold her hand. We crossed the bridge and everything, and got over there to this landing, and they'd had all these because he had the oil company there in Chalice, so he had all these old oil drums, 55-gallon drums, and they were using that to put the ore in. And you know, I don't know if they were taking it back to town to sluice it or what they were doing with it, you know, but they had all these drums there. And Buck was telling my dad that, yeah, that usually when that happens, them guys or whoever, the lumberjack dudes, would come up there and they'd pick up all the drums that they had loaded with ore and just toss them around like beer cans and stuff, you know. And you know, of course, at that age, I had no idea what a 55-gallon drum of dirt weighed. You know, I have a
Yeah.
pretty firm understanding nowadays, but you know, there ain't no two or three guys going to pick one of those up and
No.
toss it around. So anyway, we're looking around at all this stuff. My dad sees this trackway leaving the landing going up. Is downriver, which would be going to the south, and it went down river on a grade. It was an old log road, so it went down river up over towards a ridge that was probably, you know, maybe 80 to 100 feet in elevation for where we're standing. And you could see this trackway going, I mean, just straight as an arrow. And we got over there and was looking at these tracks, and I'm like, man, these are, you know, these are some big old, you know, big old tracks, you know, because my dad, he was 6'2" and wore a size 12 boot. And, you know, so we were looking at him, and about the third track, he stood in that track, which I can't remember if it was a left or right footprint. You know, you could tell by the toes, though. And, you know, he's like, "This is a long way." So he's swinging his right leg, and he launched off, and he was probably 3 feet short of reaching that next track, you know. So
Shit.
then the discussion began about, well, how are these guys, you know, if they're faking this, how the hell are they doing it, you know? And so Buck's like, well, they probably got a big round or something and put these fake feet on there. And so my dad's like, well, if they got a round that gosh darn big, you know, they got to have a spindle in it or a rope through it or something. And he says, where's the evidence of that? And where's all the footprints of these guys dragging that 600-pound round with these fake feet on it to leave the tracks
Oh
without leaving
shit.
nothing else, right? So we followed it up right to the top of the ridge, and there's a big ponderosa pine that set just off of the road about 10 or 12 feet and just right at the top of that ridge. And that's where the last track was. And it was like just Gandhi, you know, I mean, nothing else around there. So we stood there and studied, and it's like, you know, well, he he'd had to jump up the tree or climb the tree, but how did he get to the tree? And you know, so that debate went on for quite some time.
So that
And
track was going straight to the tree, like straight at the tree, not
well,
around it?
no, the tree was probably about, I'm going to say probably 10 feet off the side of this road, but just right parallel to that tree is where that
Oh,
last
gotcha.
track is,
Gotcha.
right? And so, and that kind of comes into play later down the line, years and years. But, I just thought it really odd. It's like, well, what happened? And, because I was like with my dad, well, how'd they do this? How'd they pull that off? So anyway, the consensus was it was just the lumberjacks pulling off this hoax. So we had a good rest of the weekend. Never heard anything else. No more sounds. No more nothing. And went home, did our thing. We did return to that area. Like I say, I apparently, according to my folks and photographic history, that we were primarily raised in that area on the Salmon River in the Yankee Fork. But we went back there, and I think it was probably a year or so later, and my mom would load us all up in the station wagon. We had like a 62 or 63 Chevy station wagon. And so she'd load us all up and take us up there. And then my dad would come up on the weekend. And, but doing this, and I think by this time I was probably 7 or so, and my dad had given me an old fly rod that he had. He's like, well, here, this is yours, and he showed me what to do, primarily just, crick fishing and stuff. Well, you just poke this through there with your fly at the end and then just pay out line until it hits the pool that you can see. So I did that up in this little tributary, just probably, I don't know, maybe 2 miles from Custer. The road kind of sweeps up river, and then there's a road that goes up the hill over into Loon Creek, where right at the top you're into the Frank Church Wilderness. So this is just right outside of the Frank Church Wilderness. And I have heard, I think you relay a couple of stories from guys that have had experiences in the Frank Church. But at
Probably.
any rate, I weasel my way up through your dog hair, choke cherries and brambles and shit. And the creek, you get up there about 200 or 300 yards, and you'd start coming into some pools, and so I'd stay downstream, and I could see all these little brookies in there. I'd catch the crap out of these brookies, take them back, mom would fry them up. And, then once my dad, he got me hooked on them as a young kid, it's like 6, 8 inches, you scrape them and then cut their heads off, mom fry them up, and then you just eat them like potato chips, bones and all, it's great. So anyway, I
Heaven.
did that, but back in there, I'd see tracks back in there as well, and I'm like, say at this time I'm like 7 or so, and footprints about the size of mine, and bigger
Wow.
ones and everything all around there. So I was like, well, yeah, these
Wow.
guys must be bringing their kids up here doing a little fishing and stuff too, So at any rate,
Right.
as the years go on, you just kind of put that off to the side because, well, that's just lumberjacks and their kids and everything.
Yeah,
So
right. The big ones.
yeah, later, I think it was probably my dad bought a new '69 Chevy. I think it was it was in late '68. It was during deer season. He just bought this brand new Chevy pickup truck, 327, 4 speed. So we were going deer hunting, and so this is great. I was with my dad all the time, so we're going up, and it had snowed. And back in them days, you'd always have a foot of snow or so on opening day of deer season. So we're going up this
Nice.
canyon that we'd been in 100 times, and well, we're going up the road, and it was icy as shit, and there'd been a bunch of hunters and everything before, so the road was packed down and icy. Well, he spins out and gets the ass end off in the ditch, and it's like, we're stuck. And I'm like, well, geez, maybe one of them 4-wheel drives would be pretty handy. Well, we sat there for 20, 30 minutes, and this Jeep comes down the road, and this big old boy climbs out of that Jeep. And I mean, he's probably 6'7", 6'8", 300-pound dude, lumberjack, right?
Right.
They had a cut going on up there, and big ass beard and shit, And I'm like, wow, yeah, this guy's got some huge ass feet, So I it all just kind
That's
of
the dude.
it kind of just fell into place for me, being a kid. So I'm like, yeah, all right. So anyway, after years and years of thinking about that, it was, you know, that's just what I had the mindset of.
Yeah.
And so I'd hunted. The hunting age legally in Idaho is 12 years old. And I was a pretty big kid at 10. So my dad's like, hey, let's go down. Let's get you a hunting license. And I'm like, you sure, Dad? He's like, let's go, man. So we went down. And sure enough, they got me a hunting license and stuff. So I started hunting, you know, legally, illegally at 10 with a license,
Perfect.
so it was all cool. And, doing that for many, many years. And like I said, then I did a tour in the Marine Corps and everything, and with sports and all in between. I just kind of pushed all that to the side. And
Right.
then in 80, I got my honorable discharge in 84. And I had, of course, my dad and Buck were still partners in several ventures, and he wanted to do another venture. And at that time in Idaho, you couldn't be a principal in more than 3 corporations. And
Mm.
so I was going to be a lifer in the Marine Corps. That's what I wanted to be forever and ever. So, but after the barracks bombing and everything in 83, my mom, she was all paranoided up. She was talking to me, everything, which the Red Cross had informed them that I was MIA in that operation. So, that kind of fuzzed her up a little bit. So
Wow.
anyway, in 84, when my dad, I talked to my dad and he says, hey, he says, you know, I know you love what you're doing, but he says, I got a business opportunity for you. He says, Buck wants to get out of your share in mid-state. And I'm like, okay, what's it going to take and everything. So anyway, I decided, okay, I'll take my discharge, come back. So I used my combat arms bonus to buy his shares. And then we signed a 5-year note to pay off his portion of the assets and stuff. So I started doing that. And then, it was just kind of a continuation of, that afforded me the ability to do everything that I love to do, which being in the woods, doing, things that I love, hunting, fishing, all this
Yeah.
stuff. So, it was a great situation for me. And it just got better after the years and years because my dad ended up passing away unfortunately, he got sick on an elk hunt in 1990 and we lost him. So, that was kind
Oh,
of a
shit.
big setback.
That
I
sucks.
felt guilty for years, because it was on a hunt that I planned and everything, and he got sicker than shit. And I'm like, Dad, let's go to the hospital
Ah.
and everything. He's like, no, I'll be fine. And the next morning we
Mm.
went up, and at this point, he was only 71 years old at the time, and he was, still just out there. But he'd kind of resigned himself to be the designated drop off guy. We'd all go as a party, but everybody primarily solo hunted because one guy get dropped off on this ridge and then, progression and stuff. And then by the end of the
Yeah.
day, you'd be back at camp. And when we got back to camp after that first night, he was in bad shape. The next morning, he
Mm.
decided he drove anyway. It was a deal, but it was a prolonged deal. He suffered a lot, and I'm regretful for that. But
Mm.
yeah, so anyway, progressing on, I hunted this southeast Idaho area extensively since the age of, well, going with my dad from, the age of 6 and then actively hunting at 10. And we had a unit over on the southeast side, Unit 76 is what it's called, and on the Idaho controlled hunt map and everything. So we hunted that extensively, and I'd been hunting that for, like I say, since probably 1970. And
Right.
in probably about, well, I bought this. I got to tell this story too, because this is primarily Buck's story, and I named my dog Buck after Buck Jensen because he was
Okay.
just a terror, brutal son of a gun. So I got this pup in 2000, Yellow Lab, and my youngest son picked him out. He wanted him, and we picked him out of this litter of 8, and he was like the runt. And I'm like, "Are you sure that's the one you want?" And he's like, "Yeah, Dad, this is the one." But this dude turned into a tank. He wasn't as big as a lot of Yellow Labs, but he was like 93 pounds and feet like a grizzly bear. And he'd
Right.
swim for 8 hours a day, just nonstop. So anyway, we started putting in on this controlled hunt over there in this Unit 76 in about 2007. 6 or 7, somewhere around like that, because it was a pretty easy draw. They had 2 cow hunts, an early and a late, and then an early and a late bull hunt. And back in the day, they were pretty lucrative. I think it was like 1,300 cows early and 750 bulls early, and then 1,300 late and 750 late bull. So the first time I had a bull tag in there, went up there, and this dog, and I mean, you know, they just gravitate towards the alpha male. I mean, that it doesn't matter if the wife has him or whatever. They're, if you're the alpha male, they're going to be right there where you're at. So this
Right.
dog had to go with me, and my wife at the time, she's like, that dog is, you got to take that dog, because when you leave, you can't control him. He's just a freaking animal, right? So
It's like my
so
dogs.
I bought him these porta kennels, the plastic or fiberglass, whatever they are, the portable kennels that you put in the
Yep.
back of your truck and everything. And he'd literally destroy them. Had a couple of times antelope hunting, and thank God I'd shot this big goat, and I could hear him coming ape shit undone in the truck, and pretty quick here he comes, and I got down to where I'd shot this goat, but the sagebrush was probably 7 feet tall once I got down in there, and I'd looked for 30 minutes or so and couldn't find this buck. And here old buck dog comes down. He got down there and shoop right over there, and there he was. So I'm like, right on, bro. So anyway, we're up in this unit and we're hunting, and I'd scouted it out before, because I'd never elk hunted in this unit before. I'd been hunting deer in there for probably 30 plus years at this time. And so I went up there and we scouted it out. And a buddy of mine, they had some family that had a cabin down on Crow Creek. And so that's kind of where we base camped. And I take the dog with me up on the ridge in the morning, and he's pretty good about just chilling in the truck. You could leave him in the camper or the truck or whatever, and he'd be fine. That was his truck. So I'd come back to the truck where I'd park on this ridge, and he'd be all antsy to get out. And I'd be okay. I'd let him out, and he'd go over to the ridge where it dropped off. And I like parking on this ridge, because on this particular ridge, you could sit there and you could glass the area, and for miles, and see all the ridge fingers and things like that. And on any given morning, I could sit there and spot 5 or 6 bunches of elk around there, and then plan your hunt
Nice.
accordingly after that. So, but he would go over to the edge of this ridge, and he had this thing about, he was a retriever. I mean, you'd take him out and he'd find a friggin' deer leg, elk leg, stick, whatever, and then game was on, right? He wanted to play fetch. And he had a real distinct deal when you did that. I mean, he's well trained. He'd bring the dummy back or whatever, drop it at your feet, and then he'd sit. And it'd only take, 30 seconds or so before he lost his shit if you didn't pick it up and throw it for him again. He'd start this barking deal, and a specific bark. So anyway, he'd ran over to the side of this ridge, and he'd bark, 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 and he'd look at me, and I'm like, well, go ahead and go. And he dove off the ridge, and he went down this ridge, and then up over the other ridge, and then over that second ridge finger, it'd be all quiet, and then pretty quick you'd hear that goddamn bark where he's doing his retrieving deal. And then this would go on until it got past dark, and then he'd come up, tongue hanging out a mile, load him up, and away we go. So the following year, I went down there. I decided, well, I'll set my camp trailer up on this ridge, and they'd cut this ridge through, and it was just kind of a shale slide crap. I know you're familiar with that. I've seen some of your videos where you're hiking down some shale
Oh yeah.
slides and stuff, right? So they'd made this cut across this ridge finger on the shale slide, and then
All right, we're back on. Keep going.
all right, right on.
We're good.
So I parked the old Bonanza on this ridge finger for the next couple of years, because it's like in Idaho, if you draw a bull, you can't put in for another bull for, you got to let a year go by. So every other year you put in. So I just put in on the cow the next year, right? So anyway, so excuse me, parking the same spot, the same shit with the dog would go on. 4:30 in the morning, I usually wake up at 4. just out of habit. But at 4:30 in the morning, he'd be like laying down. He'd get up. He'd be at the door whining. You'd let him out. You'd hear him off he goes down over the ridge.
All right.
All right, we're back again. Okay,
Yeah. So the
sorry
dog's
about that.
freaking out.
So yeah, this goes on until every year, and it's the same thing in the morning. At 4:30, he goes out and comes back. By 5:30 or so, just wore out as shit. And then every evening, I come in just right at dark or so, and he goes out again. Well, in 2013, I had this old boy I met. He was an ex-Marine too, and not ex-Marine. Once a Marine, always a Marine. But anyway, he'd got all shot up in Vietnam and only had like half of one lung capacity left and shit, and smoked Pall
Mm.
Mall studs like they were going out of style. But he's a good hand, and
Shit.
he was getting just his little bit of disability deal, and he just lived down the road there from where my truck yard was. So I'm like, and he knew trucks, he'd done trucking and everything. So I'm like, hey man, I says, if you want to come over here and service my trailers and do the services on my truck, that'll free me up to do a bunch of shit, because at that time, I was just running myself. Why, I 15 trucks, 35 trailers going, it's like
Oh,
it
I
was
get it.
nonstop. I'd work 20 hours a day and, so I'm like, it'd be a godsend. So he come over there and of course he knew my dog from years before, and they were drinking buddies, Chuck, he'd always have a 12 pack of old Milwaukee or some shit. So he'd start work and him and the dog would drink beer in the shop all damn day long. And I'm like, dude, you need to quit getting my dog hammered every day. But so he put in. I got him his first. He'd moved out from Pennsylvania, and I got him his first elk. Me and my oldest kid kind of herded him right into him, and he got a big old cow. It ended up being a 13-year-old cow. I didn't know they lived to be that damn long, but she'd been
Yeah.
double ear tagged. She'd been caught. I mean, she probably wouldn't have made it through that winter. Her ivories were just right at gum level, but huge,
Right.
man. I mean, huge and beautiful. But anyway, so he was hooked, and so I put him in on this cow hunt up there. And we'd went up, and this was in 2013, and we went up and we parked the camper on this same ridge, and I'd done some scouting around beforehand, so I knew where the elk were at and everything. So the first morning we get up, and Buck, of course, he's wanting to go off, and Chuck, he's like, "What the hell is that dog doing down there? Who the hell is he playing fetch with?" Because he knows the whole fetch game with Buck, and I'm like, "Dude, I have no idea, but he's been doing it for years." So he comes back, we load him up in the camper, we take off, go down, and I shoot my cow, and he was supposed to be down at the trail. It was probably 800-yard walk up to this ridge line, and I just set up on that ridge line. There's a little bit of a saddle there, and new growth timber after they logged, and then some old growth timber over there. But anyway, she come out, about 60-yard shot or so. So I went down there, broke her down, had my game bags and everything, hauled her back up the hill and in the game bags and hung it in the tree, while I got the whole thing out. And then once I started packing them down to the trailhead, and on my first trip, I'm looking, and yeah, he's down to the north of me about a mile, sitting in a saddle, and I'm like, you're right in the wrong spot. So anyway, I get the whole elk down there, and I'm hollering at him. He doesn't hear me. He's looking the opposite direction. So I gather up two game bags, and away I go. I hike down there to the truck, and he don't even see me till I'm within about 50 yards. Oh, well, hell, there you are. And I'm like, dude, I'm down there screaming at. So we get all loaded up, get back to camp, and he had to leave back to go home. He had to take his wife to the hospital or something, or a doctor's appointment later that night. And so I'm like, okay, yeah, go ahead and take the truck, get out of here. And he's like, well, can Buck go with me? I'm like, yeah, that's his truck. You're not going anywhere without him. So they both load up and take off. So I'd taken, and this was a mid-October hunt, and it was getting fairly warm during the day. So I just threw some some rope over the camper, and I put them quarter bags hanging over the north side of the camper so they'd stay in the shade. And it was cool enough at night. It was getting down to freezing, so I wasn't too worried about it. And then I put the heart and liver in a 16 quart soup pot that I had, stainless steel deal. Watered it down, salted it, and just stuck it outside the door there. And the next morning, about 4:30, I'd woke up and I could hear something. I could hear a noise. It wasn't like footsteps or anything, but I could hear something scruffing in the gravel out there. Because, like I say, this is all just like shale, scree stuff out there, hard packed as hell. Yeah, I mean, you couldn't leave a print in it if it rained, 10 inches that day.
Yeah.
But I'm laying there, and I was sleeping in the front bed of this little camper right next to the door, and I had that pot just right outside the door. And I could hear this faint sound, something in the gravel. And then I heard the lid of that pot pick up. And I'm like, what the hell? And I'm thinking, well, raccoon, he's just going to yank it off of there. But this was,
Yeah.
I'm sure you know that sound you make when you take the lid off pot. And then,
Yeah.
5, 6 seconds later, I hear the lid go back on the pot. And then I hear this faint sound in the gravel. It wasn't no thunder and pounding noise or anything. I'm like, well, shit, coyote, bear, I don't know, but a bear isn't going to take a lid off, put it back on either. So I get up, I make my coffee, and it was raining, kind of a shitty day. And like I say, I'd already got my elk. So I was like, well, I'll just wait and do a little glassing when it gets light enough. And I glassed around, and I'm like, from where I was at, there's a great big ridge to the west of me, and all these ridge fingers come off of that ridge. And this is probably 10,000 foot ridge line back behind me that runs for probably a mile and a half north to south. So, well, I'm going to go through this timber and get up above tree line there and see what's going on up there, because I'd seen some real big bucks up in there in the past. And it was luckily one of the times in the tagged where you could shoot a mule deer at the same time. So I had gathered up my gear, my day pack, spot and scope. I shoot a 7mm Win Mag or a 300 Win Mag, but I had the 7mm at the time. So I took off through this, and it's just all dog hair bramble stuff, mountain ash and scrub quakies and dog hair crap and new growth, so I'm not being stealthy at all. It's like you try as you might, but
Yeah.
anything can hear you coming for 200 yards. And got up, but maybe went about 100 yards or so, and I could see a clearing ahead of me. Well, somewhat of a clearing, maybe 30 yards in diameter, and I could see a big blowdown up there, and the root ball poking out of the ground down on it. It had been there for a long time. It was all bleached white and everything. So I'll just make my way up there and make a plan from there. So I get up there, and there's a bunch of mountain laurel growing around, so I had to bust through that crap. And I got to this tree, it had been, it was probably, I don't know, 4 foot in diameter, old blowdown. So it had a pretty substantial root system on the end. And I surveyed it a little bit, and I'm like, yeah, it had broken off, probably about 30 yards long or so, 60 feet. And somebody had cut or drug off the upper end of it. But anyway, so I get up there to this thing, and I'm surveying around and being quiet and listening. And I just picked up my right foot to put up on that log, because I figured, well, I'm just going to get on this log and I'll walk to the end and bail off of the log, not have to walk through all this tangle shit. And I was looking down, I picked up my right foot to put on that log, and I heard this like you dumped a bushel basket of gravel or something at the far end of this root ball, right? And I look over, and here's this dude standing there, black as black can be. And I heard a gal, I think here a month or so ago, you were relaying her story, and it was like it was so black it was darn near blue or something like that.
Right.
That's the way this dude looked, man. I mean, it was black and just and short, like, kind of like a black bear length of hair on it. It
Yeah.
wasn't. I didn't see any long hair hanging off of it, but I could see the hair, and he was standing just perfect profile at maybe 60 feet at the most, and never did look at me, but I could see this profile. And the conical wasn't really so conical. It was rounded, but there was kind of a protrusion up here on the back end. But what I noticed was that the trapezoids came off of his shoulders right up to the back of his head. And I'm like, wow, that's one muscular son of a gun, right?
Yeah.
And then this is where it started getting weird on this incident. So I'm looking at there, and this is just only maybe 3 or 4 seconds, but as he's standing there and I'm looking, I could see the left arm, his profile, head, never looked at me at all. I could see the top of his hip, and his back just started disappearing. It looked like the foliage on the other side. I shit you not.
What?
And I'm like, what? Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. And then he just took off. And I mean, like, whoo, like the flash, right? And I heard three distinct thump, 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 and then stop. And I'm like, shit, he's got to be, because he was, the way it was going, he kind of arced around and would have been like right in front of me at probably the same distance, 30 yards or so. And I always carry a pair of 10 by 50 Simmons mini binoculars, for art. I just got in the habit during archery hunting, from years back. So I started glassing, and I'm like, he's got to be there. But the canopy was so thick I couldn't see anything. But I stood there for probably 30 minutes, never heard anything. And I mean, this area, and I'd hunted extensively in this area, and it is always just silent as can be. I mean, there's a boatload of deer and elk in there, but I mean, you don't hear ravens or Tweety birds or anything. It's just quiet, deadly quiet. So I'm
All
like,
the time?
I'm glassing everything, trying to see what's going on, and like I say, never heard another sound. So, and this is probably 20 minutes gone by, and I'm like, well, so I get up on the log and I walk down to the root ball end. I jump off and I go down there, and you know how the windfalls are. You got a pretty substantial hole where the root ball was. And I'm standing in this root ball, and I'm like, shit, I can't even see over the top of the root ball to where I was standing. Right. And then, like, okay, over here would be on the south side where the root ball was. And that's where he was standing when I saw him. So I go over there and I look, and it wasn't a full track, but it was just like the front of the footprint. I could see I guess it would be like the ball of our foot or something, and five
Right.
toes impressed right where, and this shit is all, like I say, the same type of material, just shale shit. But when that tree fell over, it pulled some dirt out of it. So on the edge of the shale there was a patch of mud, and that's right where this track was. And I could only see
Wow.
like from like the ball forward, but there was five distinct toes and everything. And that's when it was like, now I know.
Right.
In 1966, this was what made them tracks down there.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
So, but I had took off in the direction he'd went. And like I say, I'd never, after the 3 steps, I never heard anything. No brush moving, no
Shit.
nothing. But standing there from where he was at, of course, I was probably 2 foot taller. Now I could see over the root ball down to where I was at. And I'm like, yeah, this guy was probably at least a foot, maybe a foot and a half taller than me. So after this, we'd always been archery hunting if we didn't draw in the Little Lost River drainage. And so me and my kids had put in and didn't draw, so we went archery hunting in the Little Lost drainage in the year 2014, and did all that. And then at this time, Buck, he's 14 years old, and he's getting to be. I took him up there with us on that archery hunt, and he'd still, I'd take him grouse hunting in the evenings, and he was still all about it. But God, he couldn't get over the deadfall and shit. I'd have to pick him up, and I'm like, God, I hate to see this. So anyway, in 2015, I decided, well, man, I'm going to take him back over here to this unit where we'd been, where he had his pal, where he's playing fetch and shit with this guy. Because I was curious now, because I seen this thing, and I'm like, okay, maybe that's what he was interacting with. So
Shit. Crazy.
I know, right? Because you hear all these stories about, these Sasquatch, Bigfoot, they just hate dogs, and I'm like,
Yeah.
and I had no idea for years what the hell he was dealing with down there. And everybody, up in this area at that elevation, it's like, the chance of a homeless guy being down there without a fire or anything at all, day or night, is pretty slim. But, I don't know. So in 2015, I'd taken him out to the river where I'd trained him on the Snake River for years and years. And on Valentine's Day, we had a good weekend out there. And then I told my wife at the time, I says, I'm going to take him up to go over to Wells Canyon with him again, because he really likes it up there. So we went up. Oh, and I got to rewind the bus one more time. After I saw this guy up on the ridge that day, I got back down to the camper, and I got to thinking, and I'm like, this, with that thing out there where I'm perched on this ridge, if that guy got pissed off, I'm going down, and I'm going down 800, 900 yards. All he's got to do is
Right.
pick up the tongue, push it over. So I'm like, I abandoned that spot. I went down on the main road. It's on a little pull off
Shit.
down there. So, man, I forgot about that. I was going to, but yeah, it's like, yeah, this guy.
Makes sense.
So we went up there, and I didn't take the camper. I just thought, well, we'll go up there in the tent. And this is 2015. It was August. It was probably, I know it was after the 13th of August, because that's my youngest son's birthday, and I spent it with him. So this is probably around the 18th, 20th, or something like that. We go up, take the tent up, and I thought, well, I'd do some fishing up there, because the Crow Creek is always just, well, up until early July is just plumb full of spawning cutthroats. They'll get in there, and they'll hang in there for a couple of weeks after the spawn. Well, so we go up, set up on a Friday night, and I'd come over the pass. You come up out of Georgetown, you go up over the Georgetown summit, come down, then there's kind of another little blind summit, and you start down this Wells Canyon, and that's where I'd primarily been operating out of for years. And right when you get to the flat, there's a little pull out, and that's where we set up. But usually at the top of this little second summit, there's always, a gang load of four-wheeler guys and stuff set up there, and people that are setting up pre-archery hunt, because archery hunt starts the 1st of September, or Labor Day weekend, the Saturday of Labor Day weekend, whatever that may fall on. And I figured there'd be just a boatload of people up there, but there was absolutely no one up there at all, and not a soul. So we went down. It's only probably, maybe a mile, probably only 500 yards as a crow flies, but you got to make some switchbacks to get down. Once you get to the valley floor, there's a little pull out there on the right hand side where I'd camped previously, and so that's where we set up. And we went down, did some evening fishing, and then we better gather up some firewood. So we come back, got the chainsaw out, got firewood, went back to camp, and I was cutting the firewood, and I hear this woo from up on top. And I'm like, oh shit, well, there's must be somebody's up there camping, So me, anytime I hear shit like that, I got a response. So I'm like, woo, back. So we go on and everything, and then get everything set up, camp tidied up, load up the dogs. So we'll take a ride up and over the top there. I need to get a little more firewood for the weekend. So we get back up there to the top, and still nobody up there. And I'm like, well, somebody must have just rode in on a dirt bike or something and was carrying on. So, but anyway, got back camp, and that night it got dark. Started the fire, had a nice fire going, and had my F-250 Power Stroker 99, and the wife had a bunch of greatest country artists CDs in there, So I plugged in them,
Right.
had both doors open, and I was like, nobody around, which was really friggin' weird. So I had it rocking out pretty good, listening to all these CDs, and made, I had these steaks, butterflied, boneless ribeyes, they made for Valentine's Day. They were butterflied and looked like hearts, right? So I'm like, okay,
Right.
Buck, you get half raw, and I'm cook mine and everything. So at dinner and everything, he, like I say, he'd been kennel trained his whole life. So when it was bedtime, he got in his kennel. It didn't matter where you were at, what you were doing. So it's probably 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And I was sitting there, and I mean, it's calm. I mean, there isn't a breeze. The fire and the smoke and shit is going just straight in the air. And I'm sitting there in my chair, and I'd never done this in my life. I just felt really super good, I felt just, I'm in my environment. I felt good. So I'm sitting there, and then just, I don't know what, but, or why, but I got this notion, hey, let's get the mag light out and look for some eye shine. I've never done that shit in my life. So I had a 3D cell battery mag light, So I go over to the truck, I get it out, and this timber ridge on our south side is just, it's old growth. And I mean, I was shining up through there, get down there, and I mean, you can't see anything but trunks and canopy and shit, So I walked down the length of this ridge for probably about 50 yards or so, and then I shining the light down where the valley was between our ridge and the next ridge, finger over. Yeah, well, it's all right. So didn't see anything. Come back around. There's a mountain laurel tree that was just to the west of us on the south side or north side of the road. And I looked at it, looked around there, looked on that slope, and this slope on the north side was just all this shale rock slide shit with some bunch grass and some scrub sagebrush growing on it. And that
Mm-hmm.
tree, that mountain ash was like the only tree on that side hill for hundreds of yards, and there was some quaky saplings and shit like that right around it. So I go back and put the mag light away, and I always pack a 454 Raging Bull with me. I used to have well, I still do. I have 44 Dan Wesson, and my wife, for some reason, in like 2005, she bought me this Raging Bull for Christmas, And she said, "Well, you never know what's out there." And I'm like, "Well, all right, So, and I always had that with me and use that at work. But this day, after we got done fishing, I just set it on the console of that Ford. And so I put the mag light away, and I'm sitting back in my chair there, and dawned on me that, hey, my buddy from California that I hunt with all the time, he bought this supposedly laser night vision binocular deal. And he couldn't have it shipped
Oh
to
yeah.
his house in California because anything associated with laser you couldn't have shipped to California. So he called me up and says, "Yeah, I'm gonna have this sent to your house, right?" So I'm like, "Really, dude?" I'm like, you bought a night vision deal?" I said, because at this time, and this is in the infancy, I think, of this crap. And I'm like, how much did you have to pay for that? And he's like, oh shit, man, it's only like $99. And I'm like, $99? What the hell is this, right? So anyway, sure enough, it comes to my house, and I pull it out and I'm looking at it, and like it's got a picture on the front of an old couple bird watching, and then on the back there's this picture of a coyote illuminated in green with the reticle on him, and I'm like, what the hell?
Right.
So I pull it out. It got dark that night, and I went out in my backyard, and like it's 2-power binocular, plastic as shit. And it's got this little tube on the top. I don't know what the fuck. Little button on there. You turn this green diffuse light. I don't know what you call it, but I don't think it's even a laser, a green light or some bullshit. So I click it on. I'm looking in my backyard, and I'm like, Jesus, this is okay. I can see green shit. That's all you can see.
Right.
So I call him up and I'm like, dude, I said, yeah, you wasted $99. And he's, oh, no shit. Well, so we'll just give it to your grandkid, let him play with it. So I threw it in the truck, and, that's what it was used for. Well, I was sitting there and I'm like, I'm going to check this thing out after I got done eyeballing everything with the mag light. So I retrieved this, this night vision deal. Right. And I pull it out and I'm standing there at the truck, and I look over at this mountain ash tree, like I said, about 30 yards away. And I click on the light and I'm looking through the 2-power deal. And I'm like, oh, this is bullshit. I can see better just, because I got 2015 vision, unless it's right here. So I'm looking and I'm like, I'm holding it here. And you can see it's just green shit, like, so I go down, did the same thing, go looking up into the timber there, and I walked down the tree line and looking down to the mouth of the canyon there, and I come back, and it's like I just got to the back end of the truck, and I'm like, I started backing up to where I was on the road looking with this green light piece of crap. And from where I was standing, I could just see over the hood of the pickup truck where the fire was, and Buck was laying down there. And I'm looking around with this thing, and the dog gets up and he looks right at me. And by this time he can't see 10 feet and he can't hear shit. But he looks right at me and his tail starts wagging and stuff, and I'm like, you goofy old bastard. And he starts walking my way, and he gets right to the tent, and then he looks at me and he looks at the tent where his kennel is, and he bails in the tent and goes in his kennel. And I'm like, oh, whatever. So I'm standing there, and I panning around, and I turn to my right, and I'm looking at this tree with this thing on my right by my ear, you know, just looking, and it's like, okay, I can see the tree and stuff. So I turned just 180 degrees to where I'd originally been standing. I'm looking at this shale side hill, looking probably, 10% above where my eyesight is, my eye line is, looking up this hill, and was panning around a little bit, and then was standing there just stock still. And I muttered, piece of shit, referring to this green laser deal, right? And
Right.
as soon as I did that, my brother, a pair of eyeballs rolled up right at my waist level, right there. And I don't know to this day if they were collecting the light from that weak ass green shit or not, but this was brilliant white eyeballs.
How far
And I
away?
mean, oh shit, I could have reached down and touched it.
What?
Yeah. And I knew instantly this is no predator that lives in my woods, because number one, the eyeballs were too far apart, and there's not a predator in
Hmm.
North America that don't have his eyeballs on you constantly if you're
Yeah,
within
yeah.
their vision. I mean, and as soon as these eyeballs rolled up, he stood up before I even had, and he was right there, right in this green beam of shit, right?
Stood up.
Oh yeah, stood right up, man. It's like the eyes rolled up, and then he was standing up, and it's like, I didn't have time to flinch, react, or anything. It's like, because I say I've been a hardcore Marine. It's like, if there's a threat, you don't run from it, you attack it. And it's like this
Right.
dude. he's like right there. And I mean, he was standing right in this beam. And at that distance, then them stupid things are like a sawed off shotgun because, out there at 30 yards, you can see probably 60 yards are illuminated in this green beam thing, right? Well, he's standing there and I can see his head down to the top of his pecs.
Holy shit.
And he stood up, and like I say, we were eye to eye, and that green light didn't bother him at all. He didn't. It wasn't like he was, trying to shield his eyes or something. His shit was locked right on mine, and
Jesus.
and I we're there probably a minute to a minute and a half. But
That's
into
like
it, I'm like,
5 hours.
oh man, this was real. And I mean, yeah, so close I could have stuck my fingers right up his nose, right?
Oh my
And
God.
we're just looking at each other. And I mean, he didn't have any kind of, malicious look, any kind of curious look or anything. We just were looking at each other. And I mean, for probably a minute, minute and a half, and I'm thinking, if I blink, he's going to be gone. So I'm trying not to blink. Well, then he blinks. And I mean, his eyes were like, and it's hard to describe, but in that green light, if I'd had the mag light, it probably would have pissed him off because it would have been so bright. But with this light there, it didn't seem to bother him at all. But when he blinked, it was like the lights shut out, right? Like you shut off a flashlight and turn it back on when he blinked. So he blinked, and I'm like, okay,
Crazy.
I can blink. And so, but just perfect. I mean, bright white is what his eyes were reflecting. And I'm like,
Wow.
man, this is shit. I'm trying to process all this stuff going on from things I've heard, the red eyes, the amber eyes, and all this shit. And I'm thinking to myself, well,
So you
maybe
knew what
is
you were
it
looking
just,
at.
oh, there was no friggin' mistake, dude. Yeah, I
Mm.
knew exactly what I was looking at. And it wasn't a goddamn monkey and it wasn't an ape.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, and this may or may not sound weird, but being in Southeast Idaho, I've been around and have been friends with First Nation people my whole life. And this dude, and of course I didn't think about it at the time. I was just too busy studying him. But I'm like, this guy looks like a First Nations guy. I
Wow.
mean, there was no wide, flat nose. Um, you know, he did have a somewhat pronounced brow line, but not that major. It wasn't like no, exaggerated Cro-Magnon
Yeah, yeah.
type of dude. Eyebrows and a hairline. I mean, his hair wasn't hanging in his eyes. And like I said, I was studying this guy's features. And then after the fact, I got just, fanatical about facial symmetry. I measured all of my shit from here to there and this and that, trying to, compare it to what I was visualizing or seeing with this with this
Hmm.
person. And man, it was just, totally amazing. But the thing that I first noticed was his hairline was pretty much just kind of a rounded hairline. I mean, I got a shitty hairline, but I got the widow's leave. But his hairline, just kind of made an arch from temple to temple, and had facial hair up to like his cheeks on the outside. No facial hair between his, and First Nations people, they if they have a mustache, it's sparse at best. That's
Right.
the way this dude had very sparse hair on his upper lip, and then had a kind of a, the same type of shit that I got, but blended in with
Yeah.
his cheekbones, but a lot of exposed flesh. And I'm like, wow, but of course I couldn't tell what color the flesh was because
Yeah, yeah.
it's illuminated in this green piece of shit. So,
Sure.
but yeah, and like I say, no aggression, no anything, no signs of anything on his face. I mean, didn't grimace, didn't, it's just like we were just studying one another for, I'm going to say
Shit.
probably a minute and a half at least.
It's like I say that you know as well as I do in wildlife terms, and it's not wildlife. But I'm just saying encounters that long is that's like 5 hours.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it is. But the whole time, I was lucid. I it wasn't, I didn't have any raging chills or hair standing up or something. This is just like,
No
I'm just,
shit. Crazy.
yeah, yeah. Well, it gets crazier than this.
Okay, well,
So
hold on a
we're
second. What
standing
about the
there.
neck and traps?
Well, this dude, like I say, it appeared to me, like say, looking at him, like face on, and I could see right to the top of his bicep or whatever the fuck are. I don't know. Your top of his breast, basically.
Yeah.
And
His
just really
pecs.
super pronounced. Yeah, the pecs, right? And then his traps came right off of his shoulders. I mean, from his shoulder blade right up to the back of his head.
Shit. Same dude wonder.
And it was all, and then everything like below his face was hair covered. But like I say, right at the top of his pecs was a little thinner hair. I could see there's some skin under there. So, like I say, after we're studying each other for, like say, seemed like hours, but it was like at least a minute and a half. He just turns to his right, like boom, perfect right hand face, like military executed deal. And I still got light on him. Now I can see his left eye, and it looks like a half a moon, just pure white, shining, perfect half moon. And he's looking towards that mountain ash tree for, 4 or 5 seconds. And then he kind of turns his head and looks over to the tent. And then he turns and looks back to the tree and he steps off. And he started going, and I can hear he's in this gravelly shale shit. And you can hear every footfall. He takes one step and he turns around and he pivots his body. He's trying to look past that big mass of traps he's got there. And I can see his left eye is right on me. And I got that green light on him. And after the first step, on the second step, there's a little quaky sapling there, and he picks that son bitch right up out of the ground. It's probably 2-3 inch in diameter quaky, and why I don't know. But he picks that son bitch up and never breaks stride, never even looks down to where it's at. He just grabs it. I mean, like he knew right where it was, and he holds that thing up between me and him, like I'm like, what? Is he trying to camouflage himself or what? Right? So, and
Yeah.
then this is where it gets really weird for me, because as soon as he grabbed that sapling out of there and he took his next step where his face was, I saw a raccoon. Next step, mountain lion. Next step, mule deer. Next step, cow moose. Next step, black bear. And he's looking at me the whole time. And I'm like, this is my brain trying to recalibrate what I've seen, or he's trying to tell me that I'm seeing some shit other than what I'm seeing.
What?
Right?
So when you were seeing all those animal species, was he disappearing? Like all of a sudden
Oh
there's
no,
just a
no,
raccoon?
no. I had him where his face was. These animals were appearing right where his face was.
But in your mind or in front of his face?
Well, that's where I'm confused. I don't know if it was me telling me that isn't what I'm seeing and trying to put shit in that place, or if he was projecting that shit back on me.
What the hell? So were you just seeing the faces of the different
Just
animals
the
or their
face,
entire head and
just the
body?
face, just the face on
Whoa.
his body.
No
And that's
way. That's
that's one
crazy.
thing. that's one thing that I'd say I've never heard anybody talk of or speak of before. And it's like that shit. It's like, and I was listening to a podcast the other day. I forget who the hell, but it's like, and it was about a combat mission, Marine Corps combat mission, World War II. And this dude was, and I can't remember the terminology, cognitive recession or some shit like that, to where, you know, if you see something in a certain place that you can't equivalate, your mind is going to try to, you know,
Right.
place a
Gotcha.
picture in it. And so I don't know if that's the shit that was happening with me, but I mean, I could see this. I could still see this dude's body.
Shit.
Where his face was, there was these friggin' North American ungulates and predators. And I'm like, how in the
So
hell?
was he standing still when that was going down, or as he
Oh
was
no, he's
moving
moving.
that was going
He's
down?
moving. He's moving, and he's got that goddamn little quakey in his paw, looking right at me through this little
Shit.
quakey, and I don't know. It's like, did they get some shit from trees or something? I don't know. You know,
Yeah, they do. But
I've heard that theory
were the
before too.
eyes of the animals reflecting back too? Each one of them?
Oh yeah, yeah, but they weren't. I could only see his left eye, but when I see I could see both eyes, just like they were looking straight at me.
But what about the moose, the raccoon, the deer, everything? Were their eyes glowing?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
No
yeah.
shit.
Just like you're coming down the road and you hit a raccoon or something in the headlights or a deer. Yeah, but it was full frontal. It wasn't the side shot there because like I
Yeah.
say, this dude was so thick and when he was turned, his upper body, and then of course the farther he's getting away from me, the more I can see of him. And I'm like at that time I was 6'5". I've kind of regressed a little bit through back injury, and I'm only 6'2.5" now. But this, and I was holding that light like right here, and I never moved it, and I'm aiming probably, at least 10-12% above my eye line of eyesight, right? And when he stood
Wow.
up, he was right in there. So I'm figuring his eyes were probably maybe 7.5 feet tall, and then to the top of his
Shit.
head. But like the hair, I was going to tell you, he looked like he'd just been to the barber or some shit and had got groomed, because I mean it was all uniform. The hair on his head was like just all the same length, and the same with his facial hair and everything was like the same length, and I'm like,
Wow.
and I've heard that chimps will do that to one another. They'll chew their hairs off and shit, so I don't know. But yeah, so anyway, he's going away from me, and right when he gets to that mountain ash tree, I mean, he's right there. And when he gets to the mountain ash, he turns away from me, gone.
What do you mean gone?
I mean, gone. Not there no more. No more footsteps, no more body, no more nothing. As soon
Could
as
you
he
see
started going,
anything?
the tree,
Could you
the
see
tree
like
limbs were, the tree limbs started moving, and he turned his head and was gone.
so?
I
In
shit you
other words,
not.
he
And I'm like,
vanished. Like
I, I'm, ass- I was assuming, well, maybe I just lost sight of him, but there was no more footsteps. And you got somebody walking in shale, you can hear that shit from 200 yards away. And this guy was 30 yards away from me. And
jeez.
you
So
hear
when
crunch, 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 and nothing. And I thought, well, he stopped and I just can't see him. So I just stood still for like 5-6 minutes. And I'm like, well, there's nowhere to, that hillside there is bare. I mean, it's nothing but shale slide. It goes up maybe 400 yards, and there's kind of a blind summit, And then beyond that, another 800 yards till you get to the real summit of that ridge.
Hmm.
And I'm like, there's no way he could have hiked up through that shit without me hearing him. So he must have come down across the road. And coming down the road, it had rained the week before, and that particular part of the road never gets any sunlight. And there was a big mud puddle and shit. So I'm standing there thinking, well, if he cut across that road, there's going to be some tracks. So I wait at least 7 minutes or so. So and then I start approaching real cautiously, and I get up there and scan around the tree and can see everything. And there isn't anything for 200 plus yards on that ridge line going to the west. Nothing. And I surveys the puddle and the mud and shit around there, nothing. So I just, I walk back and it's just like, I was really calm. And this is what kind of throws me too, because every time, when I hit the rack at night, I always throw the pistol in the camper or the tent or whatever. Well, I just go back to
Mm-hmm.
the truck. I put this light away, and the 454 is still there on the console. I close the door and I goes in the tent and I go to bed, man. After all of that shit, I
Crazy.
just go in there just
No terror.
nonchalantly, like, yeah. I mean, and then it's like I usually, like I say, I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning every morning. Next morning, I didn't wake. The sun had been up for probably 2 hours before I woke up. I don't know, maybe
Wow.
probably 8:30, 9 o'clock. And I'm like, I
Wow.
get up and it's like, and I started, rehashing all the shit that happened the night before.
And the dog never made
And
a
I'm like,
sound.
no, 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 he didn't make a sound at all. No.
Wow.
And so I like, I'm like, well, maybe that dude's the dude that's been playing with my dog all these years and he just wanted to come say goodbye or something. I don't know. It was
Must have been.
really,
That is
you
that's
know,
amazing.
I don't know
Shit, that
because,
is. So when you're looking at him at that mountain ash tree, was he skylined or was there dirt back behind him?
oh yeah, there was side hill behind him. Yeah, because like I say, it goes up for 200 or 300 yards. Yeah,
Wow.
and
So I'm gonna ask you another question. I'm gonna get back to that first sighting, and you said that sucker vanished. You could see through his back. Did you mean you could start seeing through his body?
well, and I can't say that I could see through it or if it was just projecting the same type of shit that was beyond him. Because they're like I say there, and October's in Idaho now are nothing like they used to be. Because usually, during deer and elk season, there's not a green leaf to be seen, but there was foliage behind him. All these bushes and shit, and that's just kind of what it morphed into, I guess to say. But it was
Right.
kind of like a isosceles triangle shape that started forming, and then once that started forming, that's when he booked it. And I was
Shit.
like,
Do you
"What
think that
in
might have
the
been the
hell?"
same dude?
I thought about that and was really. It's one of them deals where the black one that I seen, I mean jet black, and I mean it looked black everywhere.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was the green laser shit or whatever on this one that I seen in 2015, but it appeared when he, like say, when he was walking away, and then right at the end when he turned to walk through that ash tree, I could see it was like his from the back of his head down his traps, and then it looked like a diamond shape
Right.
that was different colored than like his lats and his ass were. And I mean, this dude had some glutes on him and him high and tight, big ass, and
Right.
legs like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, so I don't know, I mean, yeah, I don't know, but
How long ago was that one? The last one?
that was 2015,
No shit. Did you go up there again
2013.
after that?
I told myself I was going to, but then, I ended up going through a really shitty divorce in 2016.
Right.
And then I've been doing the trucking gig my whole life. This is my 43rd year. And
Right.
I just, after that divorce, I got on the road and I just never stopped. And then I met my current wife and that, but yeah, that, that whole deal, it just perplexed me from the night it happened. It's like, what in the hell
No
is
doubt.
going
Do you
on?
know
It's
anybody
like,
else
well,
has seen the same thing?
that's kind of what I haven't, no. And it's like, I never talked at all about, the Yankee Fork deal or my
Right.
siding to the one in 2013. I'm like, I just, like, people are going to think you're gosh dang crazy. And then after
Whatever.
this face to face deal, when that happened, it's like, I got to, I sat on it for about a month and then it's like, I got to tell my wife and kids. And so I got them together and I said, this is what happened. I said, me and Buck went over here and this, my two kids looked at me like I was a moron. My
No
ex-wife, she's
shit.
she's like, yeah, I believe you. I believe you. You've been doing this shit your whole life. She says, I believe you. And so in 2016, it's like, I'm like, okay, come on. We're going to go over here and I'm going to show you exactly where it happened. Play the whole thing out again. So it's like me and my ex-wife and my two boys, we go over there. And of course, they're grown men. And, we get there and I'm saying, okay, this is where it's set up. Park the truck in the exact same spot. This is where the tent was. This is where the fire was. This is where I was. This is where he was. And they're like, Dad, no, yeah, no. But they've since come
Shit.
around. They've since both had their some experiences. So they're like, yeah,
Oh,
Dad's not
really?
so. Oh yeah, Dad's not so friggin' crazy anymore,
No
right?
way.
But
No
yeah,
shit. Interesting.
yeah, yeah. And I've doing the hunting and fishing, and I've solo hunted forever. It's like I take my kids out, I line them out, and it's like, this is what you need to do. This is where you need to go. This is where we're going to meet at the end of the day. They
Mm-hmm.
do their thing. And so, that's just the way that my dad raised me. And so but, nobody can go. I'm going. I don't care. So, and I've
Yeah.
seen some stuff out there, but, I don't I don't spend any great amount of time looking for tracks or, structures and shit like that. It's like, yeah,
Me neither.
that I see that stuff and it's like, well, that's nothing to report about, that's just kind of shit that
I,
happens or not. But in that
yeah. I
area
just
there,
figured if
I've heard you
I
talk
just figure
about
if I see it, I see it.
yeah, the pressure thing though. And I've heard you talk about that before.
The what?
And I've owned the pressure, where you just feel
Yeah.
that pressure shit,
Yeah.
huh?
You know when. You know.
Yeah. And I've only experienced that in this area within probably a quarter, not around where I usually camp, but on that big ridge where that guy was at the foot of.
Mm-hmm.
I'd taken the dog up there back in, and this was after I saw that one in 2013. It was that same hunt when Chuck and him come back. We went up there, and it's an old logging road goes up the ridge, and then it makes a 90-degree turn and goes straight down to the bottom. And I got up to the top of that, and it's like, this just doesn't feel right. This don't feel good at
Yeah.
all. So I went down to the
Mm.
bottom there, and there was right at the bottom, there was a place where an old fire ring and stuff. But it's like, I got out of the truck and that dog is usually wanting to get it and he didn't want to get out. So I drove back
Mm.
up to the top and I got out of the truck and I just had that, like, nah, man, this ain't the place to be, which is strange because I'd never felt that at all anywhere before in my life. That, and then just from
Wow.
where I used to park the camper on the ridge, you go down this Forest Service road. I can't remember what it is, 422 or some shit. Get down there and there's a spring head, and that's where this Forest Service road ends. And I'd take off from there and go down and cross a little creek and start up the other drainage. And it was all old growth timber up in there. And I I can't remember if it was that same year. It was probably more like 2011 or 2012. But I get up to this old growth stand, and it's like, what the hell happened here? You know, it looked like somebody had taken a box of toothpicks and dropped them on the ground. All this old growth
Hmm.
timber, and I'm standing there and I'm like, must have been a wind shear or something, but why would it be right in the center? And I mean, these are some, 6, 8 foot diameter mature trees, and they're all just willy whacked in there. I don't think it would took a bulldozer to push them over, but and hundreds of them.
Root balls or snap?
Oh no, the root balls and shit were all out of the ground, but all different angles. I figure, well, with the wind shear, they'd be about, tornadoes are not out of the realm of possibility, but coming over a 10,000 foot peak and then right there's going to be a tornado. I don't think that shit ever happens. But I thought it was
No.
really weird, and I'm standing there just looking at this, and for quite some time, and then something, my peripheral vision picks something up, and I look over, and here's a nice 5x4 buck with a doe, and they're standing there looking at the same shit I'm looking at, not even looking at me,
Really?
probably 25 yards away, and
Wow.
it's buck season. I got a buck tag, and I was like, before I could even think about getting my rifle off my shoulder, they just turned, didn't look at me, looked past me, and poof, away they went. So
Right.
I went over to
Holy
that
sh!
big pile of shit, and I started working my way through there, and there was times I was probably 15, 18 feet off the ground walking on all this shit that had been tipped over.
Don't you hate blowdowns though? Aside from the
Oh
weird
yeah.
part, but don't you just hate blowdown patches?
Oh
Oh
yeah.
my god!
Yeah. Blow down deadfall shit. Yeah, that's terrible stuff. Especially you get a
Especially with a
big bull
string of
down
horses
in there.
behind you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's kind
Well,
of.
we had a guy before, Tony DeBolis. I probably screwed up his last name. Sorry, Tony, if you're listening. And he's a hunter here in British Columbia. He came across basically the same thing with a big stand of timber, just exact same way you described it.
Really. Yeah, I'd never
Mm-hmm.
seen anything like that before. And I mean, we've had wind shears, and I've been through where wind shears went through, but everything is usually cast in one direction.
It
Like I
makes
said, this
sense when
should,
you look at it.
yeah. Yeah, but this, I'm like, how in the hell did this happen? But it was kind of weird too, because you figure, well, if a tornado or something come through there, all the limbs and stuff would be all peeled off all over. No, no, everything was just intact, just laying all willy nilly.
What
It's
the hell?
crazy.
So what did your sons see?
Well, they really haven't come out, but like we started hunting in that little lost drainage, and my son and I've never had the time, because it's like I usually go where I know and do a little glassing the day or two before. But my
Mm-hmm.
oldest, he got into the trail cam deal and everything, so he went up to the head of Timber Creek and set up a bunch of trail cams up there, and then they went up to retrieve them, and he didn't get there till after dark. So he went up to retrieve these cams that he put in there. And he's like, Dad, he said, I've never been that scared in my life. He says, I've been in the woods with you for my whole life, 30 years. And he said, I've never been that scared in my life. He said, I didn't even get close to them cams. He said, I started, and he had his mag light and stuff. And he said, I look, and he said, all I can see is eyes shine all around me and all this whooping shit going on. And he said, I
No
got the
way.
freak
Oh
out.
no.
Yeah. And then my youngest, the
Welcome to the club.
same deal in the same place. And it's like the next year both of them were up there archery hunting, and they both got treed by this bull moose that would
No
not
way.
would not let them out of the trees.
Serious?
Finally, yeah. Finally, Tom said, that son of a bitch finally turned around. I got out of that tree, and I ran back to Brian's truck and got that 44, come back. By the time he got back up there, Brian was coming down the trail. He finally left. So,
No way.
and
That's
I'd
hilarious.
been around. I never, I've never had a bad experience with a bull moose. Have cows with calves. I've had some encounters with them that get a little sketchy, but bulls usually just get up, look at you, and wander off and shit. But it's like,
Wow.
no, they
You
said
got to
that
try
son of a bitch
having
is
a
mad.
you got to try having a 50-inch bull trying to mount your pack horse behind you on the trail.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt, right? Yeah, right.
Get
That's
out of
crazy.
here. You know?
Yeah,
Crazy.
yeah.
So what, did you have anything else happen after you seen that thing in the night vision?
No, I really, since, like I say, I haven't been back in that area since then. And like I say, I got him, not willingly, but necessarily immersed in work and shit. So I really,
Yeah, yeah.
I'll take, you know, 15, 20 days a year to do the archery hunt with my boys. But
Mm-hmm.
like I say, we generally do the little Oster Persimmon drainage nowadays. So I haven't been back to that area, but I told my wife, and she's a skeptic. She's a retired investigator. So she's kind of a little skeptic about things. And I'm like, I got to go back this year. But I've had, some weird shit happen, since then. And it's like the whole tagging deal. I don't know if that's a thing or not, but after that
100%.
first deal, after that deal when I was a kid, got home in like within 3 or 4 days, and I'd never seen a horror movie or a monster or any of that shit. But I'd wake up in the middle of the night, and here'd be this big hairy red-eyed bastard standing over my bed,
No
and then
shit. Shit.
yeah, and I get this claustrophobic feeling, and I've never had claustrophobia, but from what I understand, it feels like everything's just closing in on you and stuff. And this was in this bed. Me and my sister were in bedrooms, and then you got older, you moved down into the downstairs bedroom. Well, I just got this bedroom that was my grandpa's. I come to find out later that he'd passed away in that very bedroom, and I never did know any of my grandparents, but my dad's mother briefly before she passed away. But anyway, this one, I just get up and go and crawl in mom and dad's bed. And then within about a week and a half or so of coming back from this Yankee Fork adventure when I was 5, I woke up and this was seeing this thing, and I couldn't breathe at all. And so I get out of bed, I go in and I wake my mom and dad up. Well, they're anyway, ended up in the hospital with what they called at the time quick pneumonia. I don't know what that means or whatever, but spent about 5 days in the oxygen tent up there and came back
Shit.
home, and then it started happening again. And like I say, I'd never seen a creature like this in my life, but I'd wake up and here's this big hairy bastard with glowing red eyes staring at me
What the
and shit.
hell?
And then
Did it look, now that
shortly
you look
after
back,
that,
did it look familiar to what you saw later in life?
um, not at all. I mean, this some bitch as a kid looked, just disheveled, stringy, long hair and big red eyes. The ones
Wow.
that I saw, physically saw, like say they looked like they'd been groomed. I'm like, what the hell, you know?
What the hell?
But and then after the pneumonia deal, 2 or 3 months later, I'm back in the hospital with a really bad kidney infection that about killed me. And then
Shit.
shortly after this, I'd wake up the same deal, and then um, after a period of time, I'd wake up and I thought it was my dad standing in the doorway. But several nights into it, I was like, no, that's not my dad. That's somebody else standing there. This is a short guy, bald head, wearing
What?
overalls and a blue and white plaid shirt. And so one morning we were having breakfast, and I asked, we were talking to my mom, and I'm like, yeah, I said, I saw this guy in the bedroom standing there. I thought it was Dad for the first couple of nights. She goes, well, what do he look like? And I said, oh, he's kind of a lot shorter than Dad is, and he's wearing overalls and this blue and white plaid shirt. And she's like, oh my God, that's your grandpa
Wow.
that died in that bedroom that I was residing
Wow.
in. So shit, I don't know.
Well, it's
You
those
discount
that
that
same
any
theme
lot.
that same theme of sightings has been happening noted thousands of times, right? Same similar shit.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, I really, after I had that encounter in 2013, though, that's when I took the deep dive and I started, I got to find out if anybody else is talking about this shit. So, and
Yeah.
actually, it wasn't at that time or shortly after. And I'm like, yeah, this is, people are seeing this. This is going on. But I'd never heard anything about, you know, projecting other faces or other animals. And I've really thought about this in depth. Was that me trying to justify what I was looking at, or was that him trying to, say, you're not seeing me. This is what you're seeing. But
I've
it's
been
like,
leaning to him.
no, you don't see a raccoon on a 8+ tall, bulked up creature. It just don't happen.
No.
So yeah, and I'd never heard that
No.
before from anybody, and I thought, well, man, I'll put it out there and see if anybody has had any of the same thing going on.
Well, that's usually what happens when you get people on you're talking, and then as soon as somebody else who's had the same thing you have has had that happen, the same thing you've had happen, then that usually knee jerks them into going, man, thank God somebody else. I'm going to share what I had happen now. It happens every time.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I got it on the calendar. I've got some PTO scheduled for August. I'm going to go back over there to Wells Canyon in August and take my new dog. He's a weirdo, but you never know. Maybe they'll connect. But yeah, it's like,
So
but
what do you think they
you
are?
know,
What do you think these things are?
I they're definitely, I believe, physical beings. They've just got abilities or capabilities beyond what we have, or probably lost just because of our communal political situation that we've evolved into, abilities that we
Oh
just
yeah.
left behind. Because I mean,
Mm.
and I've heard a lot of people talk about frequencies and things like that in nature that these guys are just attuned to. And it's like, well, why
Hmm.
if you, and I mean, this guy picked up this sapling like he was plucking a dandelion. Next day I went up there and there's probably half a dozen of them. I couldn't pull one of them some bitches out with both hands. You know?
Was that one laying there? Did he drop it?
No, no, no. That's what I thought. Well, he must have dropped that when he got through the tree and everything. I scoured that whole hillside and I never found that quakey sapling that he plucked out. So he took it with him
So
wherever he went,
freaking.
or yeah, and I mean at that
Isn't it
time too,
amazing though?
there.
What is how has this changed your life in any way? Has it changed your life once you actually realize that this shit is seriously going on? Did it change? Did it change much for you?
Oh yeah, it's like, well, it's like I speculated about it for years, but once it becomes a reality, you're like, well, people have been saying this shit for years and years. Why is the knowledge being kept from us, and why aren't we in tune with all this stuff? And I look back on just like my service, the way technology has advanced, over the last 30, 40 years in my, you know, because it was like shit, cell phones weren't even a thing until like the 1990s, late 89s. They come out with the portable pack you put in your truck. Well, in 1991,
Yeah.
I bought a ComNet brick phone is what they call them. It's analog, but that thing worked twice as well as these stupid 5G things that we have nowadays, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, yeah, where's things going? Why? Well, but the technology is coming from somewhere, and it's not just because somebody's thunking it up. I mean, it's like, I think I don't know, I hate to get deep into it, but I mean, I think a lot of because the government knows about these people and they've known about it for a long time. And, it's not a matter of, needing to provide a specimen, because they've had them for years, without a
Mm-hmm.
doubt, just from the stories that you share on your channel, all the shit that's going on. Yeah, you know, and I get thinking, a little outside the box about our night vision technology and shit like that. It's like, well, where did this stuff all originate from? You know, these people have that
It's
capability.
pretty.
Are we not?
Yeah,
We're not reaping the benefits
it's
and not divulging the source, or what? But it's like,
yeah.
you hit a tree and you're gone. What's that shit all about? I mean, just
Did you
dude.
do you remember? Did you hear that email that I read about the A-10 Warthog pilot with the
Yes,
IR light?
yes. Oh yeah, yeah.
He
I've
emailed me again
replayed
just the
that.
other day.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
get this one. So I guess he got started asking around, emailing some other fellas that were over there, and he forwarded me an email of another guy that said, "Oh yeah." He goes, "Yeah, I watched one of those things stalking an Afghan guy with all of his goats at nighttime, but they all were going up over the horizon of the hill, and this thing stalked off behind him, and they all disappeared."
That's crazy. Yeah, it makes you wonder.
Yeah.
Like,
So,
I think
but I emailed.
they're out there and
Go ahead.
they know right where you're at and what you're doing, what your intentions are, and
Do they
before
ever?
you ever get in the woods. Because I've had some deals going, even after the fact. Like, there isn't a day that goes by since 2015 that I don't replay that whole scene in my head.
Said every one of us. Said every
Yeah,
one of us. Right?
and then some weird shit happens, and it's like, what the hell? Me and my wife, we had a little family outing. We went over to Lincoln City, Oregon, do a coastal retreat deal, and we rented an Airbnb over there. So me and the son and daughter-in-law and wife and all the kids went over there. And my wife goes, well, hey, why don't you book yourself a fishing trip? And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good deal. So I got in on there's Coos Bay's just, down the street. So I got a hold of this dude down there, and he's like, yeah, man. It's like, yeah, $250. I'm like, shit, can't beat that with a stick. And this was early
No
July,
kidding.
you know. So I'm like, right on. So later on that night, he calls me up. He says, hey, guy, he says, I was talking to my buddies, and he says, all the fish are up around Garibaldi. He said, will you be opposed to going up there? And I'm like, no, shit, Garibaldi's like an hour drive north or so of Lincoln City. So she says, yeah, sure. What time? She says, well, meet me up there at 6:30. I'm like, okay, cool. I'll be there. And so we taken the Volkswagen Beetle over there because it gets such good gas mileage and stuff. So I left out that morning, I don't know, a little before 5. I'm jamming up 101, and I just coming into Tillamook. And of course, I'm thinking, every time I'm just driving along, I'm thinking about this shit in my mind, constant about this guy. I met this guy. So I'm going up the road there. And just before you come into Tillamook, there's an S curve, and the speed reduces down to 50 miles an hour. Well, I come into this S curve and I'm looking down, the headlights pick up. I'm like, what the Christ is that? Something's down there. There's this big being, and he's standing back towards me. And right as I get straight with him, he turns and looks at me, and I see this eye shining shit. And this guy had long, long hairs, like 6 inches long and stuff all over, right?
Shit.
Face and hair and shit. And as soon as he turned around, he's like, and I heard somebody on your channel say, it wasn't like he went from a stand to a four-legged position. It was more like he just morphed into it. So that's what this dude, he hit all fours, and just as I'm coming up to him, and I'm doing 50 miles an hour, and he takes off, going straight down the road to where it curves back to the north. I'm doing 50 miles an hour, and he's pulling away from me. And it's probably
Whoa.
maybe 300 yards or so before you get to the next corner. He gets to the next corner, stands up, and leaps. And I'm like, what in the Christ is that? You
What
know?
the hell?
And
My
I go,
God. You've seen some shit.
right? And then it's like when I was up there in 2015 in my pickup truck, I'd had the grandkids and everything in the back of the pickup truck, and they had a bunch of marbles and crayons and shit all over in the back of the truck. And, I never paid no attention to it, but get back home, move here out to Nampa, and it's like, I do all the yard work. Mama, I do the yard and she does the inside of she's, so anyway, I come home one weekend and my dog now he's a pit bull Australian Shepherd cross, and the only ball he'll play with is a basketball until he can bite it and blow it up and shit, and then it's a
Right.
rag toy. So I come home and I go to bed and we wake up one morning. I go out to cut the back grass and I walk down the stairs, go out and get the lawnmower, get all the stuff doing. I get the backyard mowed and turn around. I'm going to come in and get me a cup of coffee. Well, on the third step up of this big ass new deck I just built, here's this marble sitting right in the middle of the third step. This, it's like a 1 inch clear with silvery shit in it. I'm like, yeah, I remember that used to be rattling around the back of that old Ford pickup truck that I sold to my son 5 years ago, sitting right in the middle of my step out there. And so I come in the house and I ask Shannon, I'm like, have you seen any marbles around here? She said, we don't have no marbles. And I said, I know, but there's this marble sitting right out here on the third step up. And I walked down them stairs. It wasn't there. And then 30 minutes later, here's this marble sitting right in the middle of the stairs. And then I had this ongoing deal with my key fob. I got a 2017 Titan diesel, and you got the friggin' key fob deal instead of a key. And I'll come home on a Friday night or something late and, try not to wake mom up. And I've got an old cedar chest with a cloth map of the Selway Wilderness on there, from 1953. It's pretty cool. But I always set the key fob down on there in my wallet. And so I get up and the goddamn key fob's gone. So I asked Shannon, I'm like, you think seen my key fob or anything? She's like, no, don't you? Yeah, that's where I leave it. So I'll be gone all week long, come back, go into my bedroom. There's that key fob sitting right there.
Oh boy.
And that's happened, I can't tell you how many times, and then shit getting thrown at me while I'm on the road. It's like, yeah, what the hell is going on here? I go to White City, Oregon quite a bit. And on that route, I take the scenic byway around Klamath Lake, and it very little traffic. You might not see a car at all on the 30 or 40 mile loop around there before you get on the 140. So I'm driving around through there one evening, probably about this time of day, and it's just thick timber, it's rainforest shit type over there. And I'm going
Mm-hmm.
along, and then all of a sudden, here's like this bushel basket of pine needles and shit hits the right side of the cabin window. And I'm like, what the piss, right?
What the
And I'm
hell?
like, you know, I mean, it wasn't a hand, a normal person's handful. You probably couldn't even throw pine needles. So anyway, it's a quarter mile or so down the road before I could get a spot to pull over. I had to check out, see what the hell. I pull over and
Hmm.
I'm looking, and there in the crease between the hood and the quarter fender, here's a big bunch of dirt and pine needles and shit. And I'm like, how in the hell could that happen? So I go down to White City and I load that night, and I'm coming back out the next morning loaded, and I'm coming down the same stretch of woods. And I'm thinking, how crazy was that shit last night, right? I hit the straightaway, and there was, like I say, it's all old growth shit down there. And I see this, what I think is a bird flying up out of the canopy. No, that's not a bird. It's a friggin' pine cone. Right in the center of the windshield of my truck, dude. And I'm like, are you shitting
Jeez.
me?
It's like
So
there's like,
yeah,
here he comes again. Let's give him another reminder.
yeah, I know, right? So I don't know what that's all about, but you know, I'm a pretty firm believer that if they want to tag you, they'll tag your ass, and they know exactly where you're at,
Well, that's the word
whenever,
on the street.
wherever.
The word on the street is if they know when you know, they know you know, and allegedly they all know you know.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I hear. And even here at the house, I'd be like, when I come in late, I try to be quiet. I'll go get showered up and everything, hit the crib, and there's been like half a dozen times. And the bedroom here, we want, we're older folks, and we wanted to get after we got married, we wanted to get single level, so we wouldn't have to hike stairs and everything. Well, we ended up with a tri-level, so that's just our luck, right? So the bedroom is above the garage, so you're talking the floor is probably 8 feet off the ground at least. So I get all settled in, and then a whap on the wall, on the back wall. And I'm like, what the fuck? And bird must have crashed, an owl or something must have crashed in there. So I get up, put my laundry on, and go out and look here. Nothing. The siding's all right and everything. No dead birds laying around here. And that's happened like half a dozen times.
Hmm.
It's crazy shit. And I
Have
asked
you ever spoke out
Shannon,
to them?
what's that?
Have you ever spoken out to them?
Yeah, yeah, I have. Like I say, I've never got any replies, no mind speak, no, like I say, I've never felt any aggression from the instances that I've had with them. But, I'm like, hey, just like to chat with you, some things we'll need to talk about, some things I'd like to know. Like I say, I'm going to go back over there to Wells Canyon this year and spend a few days and
Hmm.
just see, I'm not expecting anything, but you never know. It'd be awesome. But,
Yeah.
after that, it's like, being that close to that dude with my back to him twice, because I had the mag light backed up in the same spot with the mag light and did the same shit with that little laser deal. I'm like, I'm that close to that guy, and you know, he could have done anything. Could have twisted my
Yeah.
head off without me even knowing it, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, but there again, it's like maybe that's just that one individual. Maybe there's that other son of a gun out there that's got a little different insight on interactions with with us folks. I don't know, but yeah, it's like
It's
for
amazing,
the
isn't it? Isn't it absolutely amazing that this is all going on?
oh yeah, it is, and it seems like it's getting more
Absolutely amazing.
prevalent. You know, it seems like it's happening more and
Well,
more.
either that or it's been happening and now we can finally talk to each other about it, maybe.
Yeah, because in this particular area over there, Wells Canyon, my buddy was an operator at the mine that's just right there too, and that's another kind of a weird thing. It's like, yeah, right, right. Well, this is right at an active mine. Why in the hell would they be around here? But he'd lived in Afton, Wyoming, for quite a few years, and I went over there one time. He's like, "Hey, come on over to the mine. I'll take you for a tour and stuff." So we toured the whole mine area and stuff, and we were going out what they called G panel at the time. And I'm like, "Yeah, I just camp right down there. We're just off the haul road crosses the main road." He's like, "Yeah." And so at the end of the day, I'm like, "Hey, Don, I said, have you ever seen anything weird up here?" And he looks at me and goes, "Oh yeah, yeah," but turns around and that was the end of that.
Really?
Yeah.
Now get back here. I want to hear about this.
Yeah. because up there, they work. Well, my son works at the receiving end of all that operation at the production facility, and but yeah, it's like what's going on with this? Why don't you want to tell anybody about it? But you know, and that mine
Well,
has
it's
been
no.
active for probably it was active mine when I was a kid, and it still is. They said they got another 100 years or so of material up there they can generate. So I'm sure there's a lot of
Well,
stories
mines
from
and yeah, mines and gravel pits. I don't know why.
yeah,
Gravel pits, especially lots of people in gravel pits.
yeah, that's crazy. I don't know. Maybe it's
Yeah.
what it is, but yeah, I'm gonna go back though this year. I promised myself and see what happens. Like I say, I'm not expecting for anything to happen, but it just give me a little
Well,
peace
it's
of mind.
funny when you talk about when I always ask people if they talk out to them, like just the other day, I left here and I went back to my favorite coastal mountain blacktail deer spots, and I didn't mention anything on here, but I went up the mountain and it was pretty hot out and I couldn't find any water up there. I didn't bring any water or any food. And then of course I got this huge buck on my trail camera. And then I got a picture of him with his antlers both missing. And so of course I'm like, I'm not leaving. So I crisscrossed that mountain for 6 hours without food or water trying to find his shit antlers. I didn't find him.
Right.
But I finally got back down to the bottom of the mountain and I crossed the old deactivated road that comes in there. And I went to there's an old bridge still standing on the road and the creek, beautiful water. And I jumped off the side of the road, went down creek where I can stand and put my head in the next shelf up in the creek, so you don't have to get right down.
Yeah.
I'm just drinking my face off and there's cell service there. And then I'm like, I better text Sarah. And I make sure I have the batteries are loaded on my phone. And then, of course, I'm in that great big coastal timber with that creek in front of me. And I'm thinking right away, I'm lining myself up here. I should probably get out of this creek bed. And then I went to text Sarah and I just turned my phone on and then the whole thing went dead with brand new,
No shit.
all loaded up batteries. And right away, I'm like, nope, not today. I just got up, slung my
Right.
backpack on my shoulder, looked at the ground, marched my way up to the road, and marched down the road saying out loud, just leave me alone. I'm not into this. Like, can't say for sure something's happening, but the amount of people that said their electronics all went dead instantly, I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm
I
good.
haven't I
I'm
haven't
out of
had
here.
that experience yet. Of course, I usually don't use electronics a lot anyway. It's like say I I'll generally carry the cell phone with me in my day pack or something, but shut down and I don't pack cameras or any of that crap. It's like I'm kind of mission
Right.
focused that way, and and
Yeah. Well, that's the first
I'd
time I
like
ever
to.
had something like that happen.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah, a lot of people that
Yeah.
write into you talk about that, and I was like, well, yeah, that sounds cool. But like I say, he didn't depower any of the flashlights or anything that I had that night when I was that
Yeah.
close.
Weird,
But
huh?
we're talking about going back here to the face to face deal, and I said that he looked like more of a First Nations than monkey ape or anything, and
Yep.
then after that fact, listening to well, a lot of people have stated or claimed that abductions of First Nations women for years and years, and I kind of started piecing
Yeah.
that together because I had the facial recognition of that guy right there, and it's like this is what he looks like. I mean, it wasn't no flattened, broad out nose. This dude had a Roman nose that looked like he'd been broke, and I'm like
Really
that face, yeah. I mean, yeah, visible hump right there on his bridge of his nose. But
interesting.
nose just like yours or ours. I mean, his facial dimensions were a lot bigger, and that was another thing too. Because, like I say, I'm going to say his eyes were probably at least 7 inches apart, and his mouth, my mouth, and I've got my goddamn miters and stuff out and measured all of my dimensions and shit. My mouth, corners of my mouth, are even with the pupils of my eyes. And
Okay.
this guy's mouth was as wide as the outsides of his eyes. Something probably a seven
Really.
inch wide and just flat lipped all across. And I'm like, yeah, if he opened that mouth, he could probably bite my whole head off, you know, or a better portion of it.
Crazy. Well, a
But,
lot of
you
people
know,
have
and
said
then,
that their mouth just went really wide.
oh yeah, but you know, like I say, he didn't open his mouth, he didn't grimace, he didn't frown. His facial expressions never changed. We were just looking at each other. And like I said, I didn't want to blink because if I blink, it's going to ruin this whole shit. And then he blinked. So then it's like, okay, I've been staring at you for 35 seconds. I got to blink. But yeah. And so after the fact, it's like this, you know, and looked at a lot, like it reminded me of somebody. And you know that this is going to sound stupid, but you know, the First Nations actor, Wes Studi.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what that guy looked like.
No shit.
Not,
Wow. Interesting.
not. You look at Wes Studi, like when he's doing, like in The Last of the Mohicans and everything, where he's got all mohawked and everything. If you look at him with one of his more recent photos, and he's got a really defined, good hairline, that's the same hairline this guy had, with pretty much the same
Wow.
features, but more pronounced and wider.
Bigger. Bigger.
Yeah.
Way bigger if he's got 7 inches between his eyes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I mean, dude, it's like he wasn't a big ugly creature, you know, at
Yeah.
all. I mean,
That is
this
so
is,
amazing.
you know, it's like you get the feeling looking back, yeah, I could sit around a campfire and share some bullshit with this guy, you know.
Wouldn't that be great? Would that be
Yeah, it would, right?
freaking great?
Yeah. Yeah, it
Shit.
would.
Why
It's
not?
like, you know,
Why not? You
it's
know?
just like it's like, what do you know? And what do you know that we don't? What are we supposed to be doing that we're not? You know, it's like
I wonder if they just think
crazy,
we're
man.
too far gone. You know what I mean? They're thinking, you guys
Yeah,
are
well,
too
yeah.
far gone. We're just going to sit back and watch you guys run into that brick wall.
Yeah, well, that's it. You know, we're just so wrapped up in all the bullshit that can't pay attention to anything. It's like, really, you know,
Yeah.
that's what I
It's
think. They're
unfortunate.
less like they're just watching us run into our own demise.
Well, they're
I'm like,
probably
well,
living. They're probably living the way I wish we could be living, right? They're living the dream as
oh,
far as I'm concerned,
oh yeah, yeah, right. You
right?
bet. Yes,
Right.
no doubt about it.
And sometimes, you know, you watch all this new technology and all the people that are allegedly our leaders. And now I'm looking at them all. It's like they're just too far gone. The farther they go in all this technology, the farther these so-called leaders go in their ladder that leads to nowhere, the farther detached they are from all the real world. I think those
Oh yeah,
people, and what's that level? I think they're so detached, they don't have a clue where they are.
no doubt. Well, just look at what's going on
Gone.
in both of our countries. You know, it's like, good God, you know, it's like, where do we draw the
Yeah.
line with
That's,
how many people we're gonna, you know, support at our expense? You know, it's just,
well,
you know,
there's a bunch
we
of
don't need
dark
to be
shit going
doing
on, but that's another 3 hour conversation, right?
right, right,
But I got to
right
get
on,
going. I got Sarah's text. Sarah text me wondering, are you ever going to come in for dinner or what?
right on. All right, brother. Well, it's been really nice talking to you, Steve.
I'll say I
Been looking
appreciate it
forward.
big time. So glad we finally hooked up on here. And
Right,
make sure you give us an update, huh?
we'll do.
If something happens,
We'll, we'll
you
do,
get
my
a hold
friend,
of some new knowledge, anything. Make sure you get a hold of me and share that shit.
for sure.
All right, man. Hey, and don't go away. I'm going to stop record, but don't go away yet. Hold on a minute. Stop.